of this epic clause. We'll get to that in a minute. But it does tie in to a point to her being a co-favorite for the WNBA 2026 MVP. Now, of course, I believe she finished 4th in her rookie year in the MVP voting. I thought you could have made a case to have actually named her the MVP. And then last year, riddled with injuries.
Caitlin Clark enters the 2026 WNBA season as a co-favorite for MVP, tied with A'ja Wilson at plus 240 on FanDuel's opening odds. Napheesa Collier sits third at plus 410, with Breanna Stewart and Alyssa Thomas both listed at plus 1,000. Clark won the MVP award at the FIBA World Cup qualifiers in Puerto Rico with Team USA, which pushed her into that top position heading into the year. The caveat that follows Clark into every MVP conversation is the same one it's always been.
Could have made a case to have actually named her the MVP. And then last year, riddled with injuries, right? But it's been released now, as you can see in that headline. We've got the first co-favorites, or the first listings for MVP favorites by way of FanDuel. All right. And some of this has got to do with the fact that, of course, Caitlin Clark won the MVP for Team USA coming out of the FIBA World Cup.
The legacy WNBA media infrastructure has consistently kept Wilson and Collier in contention regardless of circumstances, and Clark has historically faced an uphill path through that voting ecosystem. She finished 4th in MVP balloting during her rookie season, a placement many felt undersold. Her actual impact and last year's injury situation complicated any sustained case she could build. None of that has changed structurally heading into 2026. What has changed is the roster landscape around her, and that's where the MVP question gets complicated.
Coming out of the FIBA World Cup qualifiers in Puerto Rico. So, here we are, J-Mac. It's a pretty good follow, to be honest with you. Caitlin Clark and A'ja Wilson are tied. Of course, A'ja Wilson's tied. Of course, A'ja Wilson will be there all year long, along with Napheesa Collier, for one reason only. Insert WNBA media here. They're going to keep those two in the conference.
The new CBA reshaped the Fever's financial picture significantly. Aaliyah Boston's contract came in considerably larger than projected, and Clark's own deal grew beyond expectations due to a specific clause tied to her marketability. The result is a front office making harder decisions with tighter margins. The central question is Kelsey Mitchell.
Those two in the conversation come hell or high water. The favorite for best betting odds to win the WNBA MVP for 2026 via FanDuel, Caitlin Clark and A'ja Wilson are tied at plus 240. Napheesa Collier, plus 410. Breanna Stewart, plus 1,000. Alyssa Thomas, plus 1,000. Okay, sure. And I got to be honest.
The argument for a discounted multi-year deal assumes Mitchell would accept something in the range of $1.1 million rather than her supermax value of $1.4 million. That $300,000 in savings equates to roughly one league minimum contributor, a thin return on a major concession. Splitting the supermax figure entirely and redirecting it would theoretically yield 2 players in the $700,000 range, which represents meaningfully more roster depth. That math matters because roster construction directly shapes what Clark is able to do statistically, and MVP votes track stats.
I got to be honest with you. The problem Caitlin's going to have always is getting past that old guard WNBA media. That's always going to be a problem. All right. We all know why. I mean, I hate to say it, but let's be real. She doesn't check them boxes. She doesn't fulfill that agenda that the WNBA's always had. So here we are. She's always going to have to get over that and fight that. So it's going to be an uphill battle.
The other factor in Clark's MVP ceiling is coaching philosophy. Stephanie White's system has been criticized for underutilizing Clark as a primary playmaker. The argument, essentially, is that a coach unwilling to build an offense around her facilitating and creating will always put a ceiling on the numbers required to win MVP consideration. Last season's run to the finals was fueled significantly by an extraordinary year from Mitchell, and it's worth noting that Mitchell's numbers would almost certainly have looked different had Clark been healthy for a full season.
And fight that. So it's going to be an uphill battle to win this MVP for Caitlin Clark. It shouldn't be in a just world, but, well, come on, everybody's lost their minds. Guys, make sure you hit subscribe. Make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. Let's go over, because this is in part tied to this, right? The Indiana Fever. Can they win a WNBA title this year? Can they be competitive for a title? Caitlin Clark is a transcendent player. Leah Boston, one of the best.
Outlier performances from supporting players in injury-affected seasons don't always repeat. The personnel additions the Fever make this spring will go a long way toward answering both questions simultaneously. The expansion draft protection decisions, the direction on Mitchell, and whether the team pursues additional frontcourt help will collectively determine how much runway Clark has to build an MVP-caliber statistical case. An intriguing name floating around Indiana circles is Jonquel Jones. Pairing her with Boston alongside Clark as a distributor would create one of the more dangerous offensive combinations in the league.
Bigs in the league. However, to get to that level, they need to make good decisions this spring. Is Kelsey Mitchell worth a supermax? Should they go in a different direction and poach an all-star from another team? And if so, what kind of a player should they aim for? Should they pursue a wing or a forward? Perhaps another big next to Boston? I'm just going to throw this out. Can you imagine Caitlin?
Whether the cap math allows for anything close to that remains the central challenge. The Fever are not the only team navigating significant change. The Los Angeles Sparks, with Cameron Brink returning from injury, look considerably more threatening than they did a year ago, adding another contender to a conference that was already crowded. Every team entering 2025 looks materially different from last season, which makes projections difficult and front office decisions in the coming weeks genuinely consequential.
I'm going to throw this out. Can you imagine Caitlin Clark feeding the rock to Leah Boston and Jonquel Jones? Woo! I mean, she might average 15 assists a game. Literally, she might average 15 assists a game. Who will they protect from the expansion draft? That is such an interesting question. I cannot wait to find out who is protected. If I remember correctly from the last one, we didn't know. They didn't.
The WNBA expansion draft rules were briefly published and then pulled down by league communications, but enough got out for a full picture to take shape. The rules themselves are largely identical to last year's framework, with one significant change that shifts how the whole thing operates. Each existing team can protect 5 players. That part hasn't changed.
Basketball championships, I'm coaching at it. So I'm like, oh, I was supposed to be doing something Friday night and I have to coach on Saturday morning at 9 a.m. And I'm like, oh, I'll be up till 3 a.m., 4 a.m. doing this expansion draft shit. But it is what it is. And I also think it's the night of the Final Fours, if I'm not mistaken. But obviously the Tempo and the Portland Fire. So basically, it's a coin flip. Whoever drafts first in the expansion draft, drafts second in the main draft, which is a given. And basically what the rules are.
What has changed is the elimination of the core exemption. Previously, a player who had been cored twice was completely untouchable in an expansion draft. Teams like Seattle had players such as Nneka Ogwumike and Skylar Diggins-Smith sitting behind that protection automatically, and players like Jonquel Jones with the Liberty were similarly shielded. That exemption no longer exists. The reason it was removed connects directly to the Supermax contract structure. A player can only receive a Supermax offer from their current team, and the 2 expansion franchises, Toronto and Portland, need a mechanism to actually land star-level talent.
In draft, which is a given. And basically what the rules are now is that teams can protect 5 players, but there's no longer an exemption. You can't be exempt anymore. So previously, had you been cored twice, you were exempt from the expansion draft. So because there were exemptions, for example, if you were the Storm, I'm pretty sure, if I'm not, I could be wrong with this, but Nneka and Skylar were both exempt from the draft. So they
Removing the exemption gives them that opening. Each expansion team is allowed to select one unrestricted free agent. If they draft a player who still has core eligibility remaining, they can core that player and lock her in at the Supermax rate. If they draft someone who has already used both core years, they hold exclusive negotiating rights at the Supermax level, meaning that player could earn $1.4 million with the expansion team compared to $1.2 million anywhere else.
exempt from the draft. So they were completely exempt. I think Jewel Lloyd was exempt from the draft. A lot of these players, I think John Quell was exempt from the draft for the New York Liberty. So a lot of these players, because they've been cored the 2 years, the only way you could, what would happen is that you basically got the rights. You got the rights to these players, and you could get the core rights to the player in the expansion draft. Just like restricted free agents, you get the restricted free agency rights. Reserve free agents, you get the reserve free agency rights. But what is happening now is that there's no exemption.
The catch is that no one can be forced to sign. If a veteran unrestricted free agent prefers a contender at a lower salary over a larger paycheck with a rebuilding expansion roster, they can simply walk. That's what makes the unrestricted free agent slot risky. A team can burn it on a player who declines. History backs this up.
That there's no exemptions because the Supermax contract is you can only get a Supermax from your current team. So what it is now is you're going to be seeing players that previously would have been exempt, they can now get taken and given to Supermax. So each team can only draft one unrestricted free agent. So you know the way there's by the way, if every single team protected every single unrestricted free agent,
Last season, the Las Vegas Aces protected Tiffany Hayes, believing she would stay, and she left for Golden State anyway. Teams that protect players they can't afford to re-sign end up with nothing to show for it, while the player moves on to whatever market suits them best. The practical outcome of all this is that the expansion draft probably matters less than the noise around it suggests. Looking at the Valkyries' current roster, most of their key contributors weren't acquired through the expansion draft at all.
There still would be tens of unrestricted free agents. Teams can protect 5 players. What you're going to see is rookie contracts, reserve free agency rights, restricted free agency rights. Teams are only going to protect an unrestricted free agent if, 1, they're confident they're not going to be given to Supermax or cord. So if you are at a Toronto Tempo and you just draft hypothetically,
Kayla Thornton was, but players like Tiffany Hayes and Kayla Charles came through other routes. The real roster construction happens in free agency. What the expansion draft does is give Toronto and Portland an early chip to play, ideally a player who actively wants to be part of a new franchise and is willing to commit to the Supermax deal being offered. The player pool worth watching is the group of established veterans who have burned through their core years and might want one final large contract regardless of championship odds.
And you just draft hypothetically, because it's an easiest player to talk about for this. If the Toronto Tempo draft Sophie Cunningham, Toronto have the option to core her. So they can core her and give her to Supermax. And that means, obviously, she's there. She's on the team. There's nothing you can do about it. She's cored. They have her cored rights. They have the franchise tag rights. Or they could, for example, someone who can't be cored is if they draft, just hypothetically, Skylar Diggins. Skylar Diggins has been taken.
Names like Skylar Diggins Smith, Gabby Williams, Jonquil Jones, Brittany Sykes, and possibly Nneka Ogwumike fit that profile. If Seattle is planning to go younger, Ogwumike becomes a realistic candidate. Jones has already won a title, a Finals MVP, and a League MVP. A Supermax payday with a new franchise could be exactly the kind of late career move that makes financial sense for her. Players in that position have very little to lose by at least hearing an offer.
Skylar Diggins has been taken, or has both core years used up. So what they can do with Skylar Diggins is if they draft Skylar Diggins as one of their unrestricted free agents, they have exclusive negotiating rights for the Supermax. So Skylar Diggins can make $1.4 million with an expansion team. But if she goes to any other team, she can only make $1.2 million. That being said, if an expansion team, hypothetically, drafts fucking Skylar Diggins, and Skylar Diggins goes, no, the Aces want me for $1 million.
The formula for what gets protected is actually fairly predictable once the logic gets stripped down. Teams will hold on to players they intend to core, players on rookie deals, restricted free agents, reserve free agents, and veterans already locked into Supermax money. Everything else is effectively available, and the expansion teams will already know through agent conversations happening well before draft night which players are genuinely open to landing somewhere new.
No, the Aces want me for 1 million, and I don't need 400k. I'd rather play for 1 million to try win a title than go and play for 1.4 million for an expansion team. Then they've just wasted a spot in the expansion draft. And another thing that I don't think people realize, this expansion draft doesn't mean that much. Like, if you look at the Valkyries team, if you look at even a lot of their best players, like, I know they got Kayla Thornton in the expansion draft, but like, they didn't get Salon in the expansion draft. They didn't get Tiff Hay.
Nobody gets selected by surprise. If a player ends up going to Toronto or Portland, it's because they wanted to be there. The expansion draft is set for April 3rd, the same night as the Final Four, with the coin flip determining draft order carrying over into the main draft. Whoever picks first in the expansion draft picks second in the regular draft.